Michael, you're on mute.
So sorry. Hello, welcome everyone to Console Room's Who It Yourself special panels. This autumn, the BBC is celebrating its 100th year, and Doctor Who, as well as many other programs, are doing centenary specials. For those of you that have seen the trailer for this year's centenary special of Doctor Who, you've seen that there are some classic companions coming back in the new series. Earlier today, we spoke about one of those companions, Tegan Jovanka, and you'll be able to find that video here on YouTube. And today we have some panelists joining us to talk about the other returning companion that at least is confirmed, and that is Ace, who traveled with the Seventh Doctor in the late 80s. So before we get started talking, I want to introduce our panelists. And first I'm going to mention that one of our panelists, Kathy Sullivan, is having some difficulties with her technology, and we're hoping she'll be able to join us soon. She is an author of young adult fantasy and has done essays in many books on Doctor Who. And so now I'm going to turn over to Diana to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Diana. I like Doctor Who, classic and new. I also co-host at Console Room, from PC Truck Trivia's Wibbly Wobbly Trivia and Game Shows, which is Console Room is this next January 2023 between the 20th and the 22nd, and hybrid. But we do have games and trivia and all kinds of fun things that we do for Console Room.
Then Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I've been a fan of Doctor Who since about 2010, 2011, when my friends got me into New Who, and I just blew through that and needed some more of it. So I started watching Classic Who, and I really fell in love with a lot of the Classic Who doctors and all the companions. I am also a writer, and you can find some of my most recent work in We're Here, the best queer fiction of 2020. And I was also recently fiction editor for Reckoning Magazine issue 6, which is a journal of environmental science fiction.
Great. And I see Kathy's been able to join us after all. So can you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm coming in through my phone, so it's rather weird. Catherine Sullivan. Back in the day, I used to write reviews, so I'm now doing. Is the camera working? Yeah. I basically did review in Chicks Dig Time Lords, Companions Doctor Who in the time, a couple of review essays in Outside In, and I can't know what's going on other than Michael. So now it's there.
Okay, so our topic for this panel is the companion Ace, which is obviously a nickname. Her actual name not really mentioned on screen, though it's come up in various expanded media places. So just to get started, since we have some new fans that are only familiar with the newer run of the series, we should probably introduce who Ace is, what you like about her. So I'll let the panelists kind of go around and kind of fill in some details of just who Ace is.
I can start. Ace, it was a 16-year-old coming from, was in space at at a diner where she met Mal and the Doctor. It was the episode Dragonfly, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she's street smart and very smart with chemistry. Like a lot of good stuff on that. So, but yeah, she was one of a young one and ran away from home.
Ace is one of the companions that I recommend New Who people start their Classic Who journey with. I always say Ace or Leela, because one of the big barriers to Classic Who is the pace. And with Ace or Leela, you know that even if a panning shot takes 20 minutes, it's going to end with someone getting stabbed or exploded. And so it's worth it. Ace is just a delight. Like Michael said, she goes by Ace. We do hear her called Dorothy in Dragonfire, but we don't learn her last name until some of the expanded materials. She has an adorable habit of shouting her own nickname whenever something cool happens, which is just very sweet. She's a character who has a lot of anger. She's experienced a lot of bad things, a bad relationship with her mother. Neo-Nazis firebombed her best friend's flat and killed her shortly before the traumatic event that led her to get picked up by the doctor. So she's got a lot of anger, and she does have a lot of violence, as you can see in the background of Diana's shot with the baseball bat and her habit of mixing homemade explosives. But she also has just a really sweet side of her that wants connection, and she's fiercely loyal to the people she cares about, like the doctor and her girlfriends of the week.
And what was fun was that the doctor and Ace are working on a mentor relationship. So the doctor has this cute little way of saying, oh, I need some of that nitro-9 you're not supposed to be carrying. And the fact that she always calls him professor rather than doctor is always kind of cool. And he allows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He acts a little
Especially for
annoyed, but he
with
definitely
doctor.
sees it as a term of endearment.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
I'll say also, unlike some companions, her clothing, costuming was a lot more practical.
You can actually run in those boots.
Exactly.
And I think
Jacket is
Sophie
work of art.
had a lot more say in the costume than some of the companions before her. Most of the badges and earrings and things that she wears, she picked out herself.
Fun fact, there's a couple Blue Peter badges on her jacket, and Blue Peter like wrote to her, like, you shouldn't be wearing those badges unless you earn them yourself. So she had to like provide a letter that showed that she, Sophie Aldred, had earned those Blue Peter badges.
Yeah, and I think she referenced a lot of other programs, Jerry Anderson series, Star Trek, other things. I know in one of the episodes, she very prominently wears a Batman earring.
I think the problem, though, that some of the expressions that she used are not really typically used.
Yeah,
But again, that was a writer problem.
yeah, Doctor Who couldn't really have actual swearing, so they had to do a lot of creative stuff with her expressions.
They have better ones now to substitute. At least here in the US.
And fun fact, when you include the fact that the show was canceled in '89 and she continued traveling with the Doctor in expanded media for quite a while, she was one of the longest running companions in many ways, even though she only has 31 episodes on
31
air total. That's 2 seasons plus 1 story, but the Sylvester McCoy years were much shortened seasons.
Yeah.
So she's well loved by the older fandom, in part because so much more was done with the character after the television series ended. But also because of the quality she had. Yeah.
And it led to that at the end of Survival, when her and the Doctor, they were still going off on an adventure. Granted, like, it wasn't like it almost led to like, this is not the end of the show. It was for a long time, but it kind of kept it going. And then we had the expanded media. So
somewhere there's danger, somewhere there's injustice, somewhere the tea is getting cold. Come on, Ace, we've got work to do. It's a great ending.
it was.
So there's so much we can talk about with Ace. Let's start with some of what you believe are her high points in the televised episodes.
She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Wasn't even hesitant. It was just like, okay, I'm gonna go blow this up.
Yeah, she was just, there's so many to choose from. Like, obviously the classic destroying a Dalek with a baseball bat charged with Time Lord power, like, iconic moment, can't be beat. I mean, close call with Barbara, driving over a Dalek in a lorry, that's also a great moment, but that's a great moment. Destroying Cybermen with a slingshot. Just so many also just great standing up to bullies moments, whether they be aliens or humans, just talking back to people. And just one of her classic moments in her first episode is when she dumps the milkshake over the head of the entitled customer, and you're like, oh, this is what the character is about. Or her lackadaisical attitude towards explosives safety, like when she sticks an explosive charge on a door, cheerfully says to a guard, last one back's a gooey mess, and just runs off with Mel. Like, some really great moments there.
And also remembrance of the Dalek when she reacts to the, remembrance of the Dalek reacts to the sign door in the window of the rooming house. So you're getting a lot more of the fact that she's reacting to racist and classic of the time, where you were getting the feel for her social justice. I mean, I hate saying that the social justice warrior term, but you were getting the fact that she was going to react to abuse of others. And that was a good point of her character.
Yeah, she always stood up for what she believed in, and she stood up for people who couldn't defend themselves. And she maybe didn't think in the moment about the smartest way to do it, but she's a teenager. It was great.
Yes.
Well, that's a good point that you bring at the end, the teenager part. So she is a teenager when she's introduced, but we do see her maturing across her run on the show. And the Doctor is a large part of that. This is that period in the writing of the show with Andrew Cartmel as script editor, where the Doctor is a bit more manipulative and kind of planning things out, and you don't always know what he's up to. But there does seem to be a thread here of putting Ace in situations that are helping her to grow.
She was made to figure things out on her own.
Yeah, the seventh Doctor Ace relationship is such an interesting one, because on one hand, it is like the cutest Doctor companion relationship. It's just so sweet. They look out for each other. They care about each other. The Doctor's a mentor figure. He's always having her critically think through things instead of giving her the answers. He loses an ancient magical sword and he doesn't care at all because he's just so glad she's safe. Like, it's great. But also, this is the era where that we see the Doctor, how deeply manipulative he can get. And in The Curse of Fenric and the things he's willing to do to Ace and to her mental and emotional health to ensure the fate of the universe. And for me, those two things just exist so simultaneously. Just those two different sides of that relationship.
And another thing I liked about her is that she was one of those companions who could wander off on her own and collect her own companions. Like in Battlefield, she had her own little tag along with her.
Yeah,
she was not afraid to lead things.
Yeah, and she had her girlfriends of the week. Like Rona Munro has said that in Survival, she wrote the relationship between her and Kara to be as lesbian as you could get on TV in the 80s in a children's show. And you look back and you see that a lot also with Gwendolyn and Ghostlight, Susan Q and the Happiness Patrol, Mel and Dragonfire. Ace is just flirting up a storm.
Yeah, we can definitely see it now in retrospect a lot more, because it's more normalized. You didn't have to hide behind it or something. So now it's like,
yeah, and that's my hope.
A little further.
That's my hope for the new show, because I'm like, I understand why it had to be subtext in the 80s, and I so appreciate what Rona Munro was doing there. But like, come on, it's 2022 now. Can Ace have a wife? Can it be Shu Ying or Mags, my two favorite of Ace's girlfriends? One of those two. I'd be happy with either.
I will say that the Virgin New Adventures writers writing Ace past the TV series definitely were taking that into mind as well. There were definitely LGBT subtones.
There's that continuity then.
Yeah. All right. So in many ways, we've talked about that mentoring relationship, and I think we've seen that with a few other Doctor companion pairings. I think Eccleston and Rose, and Capaldi and Bill, for instance. We had that kind of sense as well, but and even a little bit with Joe Grant and the Third Doctor. But yeah, it's very strong here, and it is sort of the beginnings of that kind of relationship in the new series. There's other elements to Ace that are also kind of sowing the seeds of what the modern companions would be like when the series came back in 2005. Can we talk a little bit more about some of the other elements besides the mentoring relationship?
Well, I think just having her personal life be so important to the plot, the issues with her mother, her friends getting taken to the cheetah planet, her bloodline being part of Fenric's wolves. We've had like a lot of companions whose personalities have impacted the storyline, but I think in classic Who, we rarely see their life outside of the Doctor. And even though we meet Ace after the time storm has carried her off to space, we do see a lot of her personal life from Earth get woven into the stories in a way that I think we see more often in New Who.
Yeah, with New Who, they're kind of subplots. I mean, there was Donna and Will. They had a really good relationship. Became hard because he had a secret he couldn't share. But having that background again, like we said with, I was going to say, like just like Tegan, we had somewhat of a background to start with. You know, we just learned more with Ace more throughout the series. You're going to say something, Kathy?
Well, she was one of the few, like Tegan, who we actually saw part of the family, and it was important. The fact that she was a runaway added a lot bit more. Well, yeah, she was a runaway before she was picked up in Dragonfire. So we had a lot more of the conflict. So there's more of a thought instead of just somebody following the Doctor around going, what is it, Doctor? What is it, Doctor? She basically is doing things that causes her to be in that place.
She had to do things on her own for so long.
Yeah, I going to say for me, we've got, the elements of family again. So in remembrance of the Dalek, she encounters her grandmother, not knowing it's her grandmother yet. And this
Curse
baby
of Fenric, isn't it?
Curse of Fenric. Sorry, yeah. And this baby that she's kind of falling for this baby and being very overprotective of, and then realizes later in the story that the baby is her mom. And it just flips that whole relationship on its head. And it's like, oh my God. In Ghostlight, she's again returning to her hometown in Ghostlight, Perryvale, and dealing with basically her childhood haunted house and what was going on there. And it again gets into dealings with her, with things that happened with her friend, all and then of course in Survival, we're back in Perryvale. There's that connection to home that keeps coming through. But also, again, the Doctor's manipulation keeps putting her in these situations. It's like intentional because he's trying to help her overcome that grief with her mother's relationship, help her overcome some of what she was dealing with what went down with the haunted house and her friends, helping her to grow. But is there some other reason he's doing this? And that's in you start to read into Andrew Cartmell's longer term plans for Ace and some of the expanded media and all. One of the suggestions of where they were trying to push Ace was that if they had gone on to do one more season, Ace would have been leaving midway through the next season, and the Doctor may have been depositing her on Gallifrey to study to become a Time Lord, which is a crazy thought if you think about it. But some of the expanded media have picked up on this. Some of the recent Big Finish works of the Gallifrey series have picked up on that and had non-Gallifreyans training at the Time Lord Academy, and Ace being one of them. Some of Death Comes to Time almost seems to be pushing things in that direction as well. I don't know if it would have been the best way to go with her, but it's an interesting thought. So the Doctor's trying to better her, but what's his reason for it? I don't know. But the expanded media have done so many different things with Ace beyond the series as well. Kathy, you can probably speak to the New Adventures as much as I could there, but they really did a lot to continue to grow Ace and her relationship with the Doctor beyond the series.
Yeah, a lot of the books that were written in the wilderness years, because they could only use the current Doctor at the beginning, so we had a lot of different adventures based in the Doctor. We had her basically being carried off to be trained into a Dalek warrior, a warrior against the Daleks. We had, oh gosh, there were so many different terms. And there were several different leaving stories and then returning stories. So even when you get to the Big Finish audios, you've got several different themes there where you've got her traveling with Hex, where you got her, Hex had a whole bunch of different stories. Because it was a longer run, you had a lot of different adventures and possibilities for that character explored in great detail.
Yeah. And she's traveled so many different roads, as you say, in the different media, depending on who was writing and what they were doing. It's all very wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. We don't know how much of that will be kept versus not kept as she's brought back to the new series. As you said, she left for a while, trained to be a soldier in the Dalek War, fought that for 3 years, came back as a more mature Ace, traveling with the Doctor and Benny for a while. Big Finish has done some stories where they've adapted New Adventure stories or even created new stories set in that time period, like The Shadow of the Scourge. Yet they've done other stories where they basically ignored the New Adventures and done their own continuity. It's all very convoluted.
And the Sarah Jane Adventures was going to actually have a theme where we run into a charitable organization that turns out to be Ace. And I'm thinking, because we also had Sophie Aldrich and Mike Tucker writing At Childhood's End, where she is running the charitable organization. Which also hinted at the Blu-ray.
I was going to say the promotional for the Blu-ray, they've also hinted at that. And even that
so I'm wondering
clip we get of her in the centenary, I think that's the path that they're following. I was reading like you that Russell had intended to bring her into the Sarah Jane Adventures. And actually, even when Sarah made up with Joe Jones, there was some mention of other companions. And I think there was mention of a Dorothy running a charitable organization. And that organization is called the Charitable Earth. And look at those initials, ACE.
At Childhood's End.
Yes.
Yeah, Sarah Jane Adventures. What we could have had, if only.
And what we still could have if we could do the spinoff I want to do. I really want a Big Finish spinoff with Ronnie and Clyde, but called Ronnie and Clyde.
That would be great. They should do it. They should bring Katie Manning back as a guest star because she's delightful.
Anyway, so back to Ace. If you were to suggest to a new Who fan one Ace story to watch as the gateway to this character, which one would you suggest?
I'd go with Remembrance of the Daleks, because you had the baseball bat and also her reaction to being confronted with neo-Nazis, and her reaction to finding that sign in the window.
Yeah,
I would have to go. I would have to go for Remembrance of the Daleks for like classic Ace, unless I know for sure I'm talking to like a horror fan. If I'm talking to a horror fan, then I would have to go for like the queer gothic horror that is Ghostlight. But just introducing all the classic Ace elements, Remembrance of the Daleks.
Yeah, it's a good intro.
Okay, and on Remembrance of the Daleks, we mentioned the anti-racist deal and dealing with the neo-Nazis. So she's not only dealing with not neo-Nazi Daleks, but neo-Nazi humans. I also really appreciated the way she reacted to the little girl. So the Daleks are using a young girl as essentially their CPU for their battle computer.
Oh, the rhyming girl, she's so creepy.
Yeah, she is. But at the same time, when she's being freed from the equipment, she needs someone to be there for her, and Ace very much is.
Yeah, I think if people like The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, that's also a good parallel there. Also, I want to amend my earlier answer to say also if people like high concept metaphors, I would then recommend The Happiness Patrol.
Yeah. Because I've seen and I've heard the troll referred to as Harley Quinns. So that whole idea of the satire of you have to be happy, whether it's a sad moment or not, like that is basically authoritarian dictatorship, basically putting that imposition on people. It's a good talk.
Yeah, I've heard the writer talk about it both as a critique of Margaret Thatcher and as a critique of the way people act towards people who have clinical depression.
I will just add, so let's say you can't get your hand on Remembrance of the Daleks, and you do like the Russell T. Davis era kind of Sturm und Drang with characters. Curse of Fenric. Ace is kind of put through the emotional ringer in that story as well. And
I love the emotional arc of Curse of Fenric. I do feel like it has maybe 6 more plots than necessary. So it might be.
So it's a Stephen Moffat story, in other words.
Essentially. So if you watched The Angels Take Manhattan and you thought, what a great use of all those different plots, go ahead and watch Curse of Fenric.
We had a question in the chat.
Greatest show in the galaxy too.
One thing I want to say in favor of Greatest Show in the Galaxy is it shows what Doctor Who can do when put upon from a production end. Television Center wasn't available for filming. They literally filmed that like in a car park because it was that or not make a story.
My favorite.
Go ahead.
And my favorite anecdote about the filming of Greatest Show in the Galaxy was that explosion was not supposed to be that large, but they only had one shot to do the take. So Sylvester McCoy did not look back and he did not hurry up. He just keeps walking at his normal pace, even though that explosion was not supposed to be that large.
Oh, gosh.
Wow. We had a question in the chat of where can people find and buy these episodes of the series. So there are DVD releases, obviously, of these stories. In some cases, some of them might be getting harder to find.
Check your library.
Yeah, I would always like to push that. Check your public library. I am finding, even with my own library, that some of the older releases, we don't have copies anymore, but you can use interlibrary loan to borrow them from other nearby library systems that do have it. So absolutely use your library if you can. I believe also that doesn't BritBox carry at least some of the classic Who as well, if you have a subscription to BritBox. And of course, Pluto TV runs a certain random selection of classic series episodes, and some of the Ace episodes are definitely part of that package.
And as far as interlibrary loan is concerned, if you're in Minnesota, Rochester Public Library has most of the audios.
Oh, nice.
So you can get those through interlibrary loan that way.
Great. I believe, is it Spotify that has a small selection of older Big Finish audios now as well? You have a subscription there? I think I saw that somewhere.
And I will say Big Finish does have some nice sales. So if you keep an eye on their website and you're like, I wasn't sure about getting into this range or that range, periodically they'll have a sale on like a whole range and you can do like a few starter episodes to see if you're into it.
And, you know, given that there's that shipping across the Atlantic and shipping costs are not cheap these days, Big Finish does have a download only option for their purchases these days. And they have a nice app that it plays through, or you can download it into your own iTunes or to your phone, but and so sometimes you can find a digital only release of some of these quite cheap that way through the sales.
I think the few audios I have, I've got them through and they're on Audible for me from after I purchased.
A small number of the New Adventures books, I believe, have also been heavily republished in recent years, And Big Finish has adapted a few of them as well as audios. So Love and War in particular, if you're looking for a new adventure to read with Ace, Love and War would be the one. It's a Paul Cornell story, and that's the one where Ace departs and enters the Dalek War. And the monster of that story is picking up on a single throwaway line from a Tom Baker story. So, yeah. Okay. So we talked about high points and episodes we recommend. What would be a low point with your experience with Ace in the series?
None. Doesn't exist. She's
I was
great.
gonna say,
Anything that looks bad is just faulty camera work and whatever. Like, I can think of silly things in episodes, like the cliffhanger that didn't work out in Dragonfire, but like everything about Ace herself is perfect.
I was gonna say I like the Ace run.
Because I mean, you can complain about the fact that a gold coin can now take out a Cyberman, but it's like, it was Ace with a slingshot. Hey.
Yeah.
Like, I guess a low point from a health and safety standpoint is the time Sophie Aldred almost died in Battlefield. She's trapped in that water thing and the glass breaks, and Sylvester, there were live wires on the ground, and Sylvester McCoy had to like yell at a crew member to get her out of there before she got electrocuted. So that's not great. Still a good episode. Thanks for not dying, Sophie. Thanks for saving her, Sylvester.
Because that was another one where she actually had a companion following around after her.
Yeah, that episode has some great guest characters. I love Anselin and Bambera. Their warrior dynamic. They're so cute.
They are.
Okay. Sorry, my brain's at a loss right now. Just what more do we want to say about Ace as we talk here? Any were there things you would have liked to have seen done on screen? Are there places you'd like to see her have gone following the series before we see her come back?
I mean, I think I've already kind of talked about what I would like to see from her in the future on the screen. And I just enjoy her interacting with other companions in general. I wish we could have seen her on the Sarah Jane Adventures, meeting Sarah Jane and what that relationship would have been like, maybe even having Jo Grant and meeting her again. I think it'll be really interesting to see if she and Tegan get to spend much time talking about the Doctor and their relationships with him and the way like he guided them or mentored them and or the way he manipulated them. But also the positives that they've had with the Doctor. I do think it will be very interesting for Ace to see the Doctor as a woman. Her father figure is now very attractive. I'm sure that'll cause a lot of confusion.
Especially with the Yaz thing going.
So, I mean, it's covered partly in At Childhood's End because we do have Ace meeting the Jodie Doctor, but it's like, it's going to be interesting to actually see it on the screen if that actually happens.
Eleanor in the chat was asking how Ace left the TARDIS, and that's a very complex question because it was never shown on screen. There are about half a dozen different ways she left in the expanded media, one which involved her demise due to her explosives. Others that involved her leaving of her own accord for various reasons, or being shipped off to Gallifrey to become a Time Lord. But we don't really have a definitive answer on that. And so maybe the Centenary Special will cover that somehow. It's rather like the kids at the end of Sarah Jane Adventures. They continue on their adventures. We don't really know what happened.
We don't know.
Yeah. I see Larry put in a suggestion of maybe a discussion of which other Doctor she would have paired well with together. I will have to say, I've read a really great fan fiction where she meets up with the 11th Doctor. And I think the reason that works is that 11, much like 7, is outwardly very sweet and awkward and lovable and mentory. But he does have that dark, manipulative side sometimes. So I think that can be a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think 10 has more of a dark side. But he could get along. He also could be about Rose, and it could be, I would say, after she comes back from the alternate universe, where she was a little bit more, had become more of a fighter.
Compare weapons.
Yeah.
I could see her and Donna getting into like really intense shouting conversations where they're both agreeing with each other about like political change or something, but even though they're both agreeing, they're just yelling at the top of their lungs because they're so mad about the issues.
I could see some I could see some passionate discussions along those lines with Sarah Jane as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as shouty, but just much more just very intense, strong opinions.
Yeah, Sarah Jane's probably a little bit more level-headed than
I want to flip this question. Which Doctor would she not pair well with?
I don't think it'd be well for her with the first Doctor.
No.
Yeah,
Because
he's
he'd be trying to
patronizing.
treat her like Susan, and that would not go over well. I could see her with the second Doctor and basically taking on Jamie's role because she'd be protecting him like crazy.
But like she had to be originally, like, we never knew everything about her, and she met the first Doctor, was her first Doctor she met. She'd probably want to blow him up.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine him telling her like you need a jolly good smack bottom, like instant nitro 9 death, instant.
Oh, that would not go over well.
I kind of see her butting heads with John Pertwee as well.
Yeah.
I think they're both so feeling that they're right that they'd be arguing more. It would be very much be that, you know. Unfortunately, what happened with Edric.
The news from Nikito.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. True, she would want to know that.
I could see them having like a grudging affection for each other, but just bickering all the time. I think it could be like a similar dynamic as 3 and Liz Shaw had, except for probably 3 would be more condescending because Ace is younger and doesn't have multiple degrees. But I mean, she does make her own explosives. She's quite smart. So I think he would have a grudging respect for her smarts and her tenaciousness and her bravery. And even though she feels like he's patronizing to her, I think she would have a grudging respect for him standing up for what's right. And I think they would eventually get along, but they'd butt heads a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw another wild one at you. We talked a bit about how she has a tendency to collect her own companions in stories. So of all the other companions that have been in the show, which one would she take on as her traveling companion?
I mean, I think she probably would have definitely taken Mel if Mel had not gone off with Glitz. Their relationship is very cute from the start. They immediately bond. She calls Mel Donut. Like, I think Mel would be.
They've already appeared in Big Finish audio lately, like High Price of Parking, which was Mel and Ace. So that's around 17 story. CD 227. And it's fun listening to those two play off each other.
I'm trying to think of a classic companion for her.
I don't know. I think I'd like to see her with Jamie.
Or for a New Who companion, I think she and Bill would get along because they have a very similar kind of irreverent attitude. And I think they would both enjoy kind of poking at the Doctor and teasing him whenever he showed up.
Mm-hmm. I think what to make her though. It'd be kind of fun to see her with Nardole though.
Yeah, I think that would be a nice, interesting pairing with Nardole. All right.
I'm trying to think of how she would also react to the new versions of the Master, like Sims or Michelle Gomez.
Yeah.
Or Sasha Dewan.
I don't like him.
Oh, I like him.
Yeah, but could you think about how Ace would deal with him?
True.
A little nitro 9 in his back pocket when he's not looking.
I think she and Missy could have great on-screen antagonist energy. Missy just like, you're trying to blow me up. I barely met you. And,
yeah. That's because what Missy could
this
do
is
just
how you do it.
That would be interesting.
Now, one thing that's come up, of course, with Ace as well, with all the expanded media, all is her name. It's like we know her as Ace. We've had the passing mention to her as Dorothy. There was some suggestion in scripts or interviews that Andrew Cartmel intended her to be named Dorothy Gale, which is an obvious reference to the Wizard of Oz. And then the time storm kind of is analogous to the tornado, whisking her off to this other world. But in the expanded media, they've mostly settled on McShane as her last name, Dorothy McShane. So, but she clearly, in the expanded media, doesn't really dig her name very well and likes to stick with Ace as much as she can.
Well, that's what she chooses to go by.
Right.
mm-hmm.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like the Doctor. There's the name you've chosen that represents who you are, right?
And I think with both of them, it kind of shows a break from their past. Ace from her mom, the Doctor from her planet. They've chosen this to show who they want to be. The Doctor wants to be someone who cares and fixes things. Ace wants to be Ace.
Now we had
Her best self.
Yeah, we had a question in the chat, and we may have sort of covered this ground somewhat already, but in Ace's character and portrayal, what about her is the most realistic and what is the least realistic in the way the character was constructed and portrayed on screen?
I think sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I have to look.
I think the least realistic is probably, as we've kind of touched on, some of her use of slang and fake swears, because had to tone down what a real runaway and angsty teenager would be able to say on TV. And I think the most realistic is probably her relationships with people and the emotion behind those, the way she can be fiery and defensive and filled with a lot of pain, but the way that she opens up to people who trust in her and believe in her, like the Doctor and a lot of her companions.
Do you have anything to say first, Kathy, or should I go?
And I think basically a lot of her prick side comes out because she's self-defensive and has learned the hard way not to trust a lot of people.
I'm going to say, like, we kind of mentioned that, she was a brash 16-year-old, immature, kind of on her own. But throughout the series, the Seventh Doctor and him pushing her to, do things and stuff like that, and her relationships, she grew into a young, mature young woman, and even learned how to use her sexuality to distract some guards. And even if that wasn't, she just grew, and you saw it from the 16-year-old into the young woman.
That's another thing in the Curse of Fenric. It's like, are you using your sexuality or philosophy or both? I can't tell.
Right.
So I think for many people, before the series returned in 2005, Ace was sort of a favorite companion of a lot of people. And I think that is down to a lot of the strengths we've talked about in this character today. Obviously, we've had some strengths in some of the new companions, as well. So again, there's that sort of sowing the seeds of what would be yet to come. Obviously, the pacing of the series was a little different, although with the shorter seasons, they were starting to increase the pace a little bit. It was still the 25-minute episode format then, but it's 3 episodes sometimes instead of 4. So we were sort of starting to take baby steps toward where we would be with the new series during the Ace era. So when we talk about the fieriness, let's do a comparison back to the other panel we talked about today. We talked about the other companion, Tegan, at the earlier panel. When we compare Tegan and Ace, how is that fieriness the same and how is it different?
Well, part of it was because Tegan was a young adult, but she's still older than Ace. So she has learned a little bit more, and plus she went through stewards. I'm assuming they had a school for training stewardesses at that time. So she's a little bit more aware, but Ace has got more of the seamy side of the street, where it wasn't the educated or we're used to leading people. Ace got more of the side where things are rather rough.
Yeah. I don't think they would get along too well, though.
I think they're both.
Until they got maybe to know more time with them, but like the beginning, just like us, it's like Tegan's just kind of an annoying.
But we're going to see them interact as adults, older adults. So I think that now they might get together rather well. We'll see. Had a good impression from the trailers. I had a good impression from the trailer.
Yeah, I think as adults, I feel like they have probably both matured and learned how to deal more with people who are different from them or too similar in ways that can clash. If they had met as younger people, I think it definitely, Tegan's very mouthy. I think Ace probably would have taken that the wrong way. Ace probably would have fired back. Tegan's not going to stand for that. And before you know it, they're screaming in the TARDIS console room.
Now, if we actually have them both dealing with charitable organizations and finding out this way, I think that they will already be well versed in dealing with many different types of populations and many different types of personalities. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, they're also as mature women now, how we're coming from the hindsight of having traveled with the Doctor and gone through those experiences. And it's a shared experience that only a small number of people across the planet have. I think there's a connection between companions that way the average person in the street wouldn't be able to connect with them on.
And plus, I'm assuming we're not going to have Eric Sayward, basically, who likes to write people fighting with each other. Hopefully, the writers here will actually have people working together instead of always having been competition.
Although, wow, they're going to be cramming an awful lot into this special with all the different people that are coming back in this one.
It can be tricky at balancing all the elements in an episode, but if it's to add more Classic Who guest stars, I'm never going to complain. I love me some continuity.
And it'll also help others maybe want to go back and explore those companions like Tegan or Ace. Hopefully they start with Ace before they hit Tegan. But
I don't know if anybody remembers the panel when Sophie Aldred was here for this convention, but she was talking about her son and how her son is always talking her up. And apparently they were at an event with Stephen Moffat, and he was like, "You should bring my mom back to Doctor Who." So, it only took about 8 years, but her son's efforts have finally worked out.
Yay!
Yeah, well, and it is my understanding Russell intended to bring her back in the next season of Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yeah,
that we didn't get. So, and he had intended to have her running the charitable organization, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. So, the expanded media that's been
Was it
pushing things
Russell
that
wanted to bring
direction.
back Susan?
Capaldi wanted to bring back Susan.
Oh,
You
okay.
gotta bring back
yeah.
Susan. When is the doctor going to hug Susan? I need this.
Well, Big Finish did some audios on that.
Yeah, but I need it on my screen. I need the doctor to hug
Uh.
Susan before we lose Carol Ann Ford. Just saying.
I really wanted to have Susan pop up sometime. Actually, there have been those rumors of Susan maybe coming back in Capaldi's finale, and I really wanted her to be there for the regeneration so she could say grandmother. Just completely nonplussed. But oh well.
Yeah.
We had,
Ace is
we
very
did
different
have
from-
Susan's, I was gonna say, we had Susan's picture on Capaldi's desk.
Yeah, that was a
True.
fantastic touch.
True.
Yeah, Ace is very different from Susan, but we do see in Battlefield a lot of interesting callbacks to Susan and references to Susan, including having Ace like pick up the same book Susan picks up in the first episode, and we see the I Am Foreman sign. And that's also, sorry, did I say Battlefield? I meant Remembrance of the Daleks. Yeah, so that's also a really fun episode just for those little callbacks. So I would say if that's your intro episode, go back and watch it again after you've watched the first Doctor era.
Well, and bear in mind, Remembrance of the Daleks is basically taking place a day after An Unearthly Child.
Mm-hmm.
So the Daleks just missed him.
Well, and Susan came from we were introduced at Coal Hill School, and even Ace got to visit that.
As did Clara.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, everybody.
That poor school.
I know. It's like, oh, they keep rebuilding.
Well, it's like that rift in Cardiff, it just draws all the bad stuff. It's amazing Torchwood hasn't set up in the basement at Coal Hill, to be honest. Maybe they have.
How do we know that? I was gonna say.
Maybe that's where Class Season 3 would have been going.
Wait, did they do a Class Season 2?
They didn't get Season 2, I'm just saying.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute, because I thought it was just the one, and I was like, oh, kiddoki.
All right. Well, I think we're winding down a bit here. Any last things we want to say about Ace?
She was an awesome woman.
She's an absolutely
Looking forward to
fantastic
seeing her.
character. Oh, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
Well, looking forward to seeing her.
I was going to say, love the companion, and the actress has been a real advocate for the show for a long, long time. She really has done a lot for the show, with the show, long past her tenure on the show. When the New Adventures novels were coming out and they did that whole thing with aging Ace up, and she did a photo for a book that Mike Tucker was writing where she's in the Ace as an anti-Dalek soldier, the black leather jumpsuit thing. And she's written at Childhood End and done so much work at Big Finish and all, and very approachable at conventions. So wonderful.
Yeah, she is like supernaturally nice. So if you could have a chance to go to a convention with her, do it.
Yep. Or play cricket with her like I did. All right. Well, folks, thanks for coming to our panel today. We are looking forward to the Centenary Special in presumably October. We're also looking forward to Console Room in January 20th through 22nd. This is our Minneapolis area Doctor Who convention. It has been hybrid the past few years and will be again this year. So there's a virtual component. If you're not someone comfortable traveling because of COVID, or you live on the other side of the world, you can still buy a mid-tier ticket that gets you access to all of the virtual panels that we'll be doing, to the Discord where we have discussions and all of that. We also do these Do It Yourself events periodically throughout the year to keep our interest in Doctor Who alive. Thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks to the panelists for participating. Everyone have a good day.
Thanks.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming.